While we've gone to church, quote unquote, we've raised our hands high in the air, or at least lifted them chest high, with palms raised upward for the more modestly minded. And we've sung all about how we love Jesus. And we come out all feeling all smug and smitten as we carry our Bibles to our cars. All the while, avoiding some of the ones who stepped on our toes perhaps the previous week, or that we are not particularly comfortable being around. We've sung songs that have lifted us to the rafters, but when it comes to serving others in the body of Christ, we hang on to our druthers, as I say. If Satan has ministers of righteousness, and Paul tells us that he does, if Satan, with his desire to be just like the Most High God, not different from, but just like, if he's working in a realm called religion, and Paul tells us that he is, if Satan has his own gospel, a counterfeit so cleverly contrived that people link their righteousness to their religious practice, then do you not suppose that Satan would misdirect the word worship to that which satisfies the emotions, satisfies self, rather than serves the brethren? I believe so. We go in needing a touch. We sing until we tingle, and all under that banner labeled worship. The people are swaying, the bands are playing. God must really get the picture that he's the prize package of our minds, at least today, because it's today that we've come to worship him. Perhaps he'll remain satisfied until next Sunday when we return to do it all over again. And it goes on and on and on all across the country. Understand, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade here, not trying to denounce folks across the land. We're definitely not condemning music or singing. I happen to enjoy both music and singing. I just want you to understand that concept of worship from the pen of Paul is not how religiondom paints it today. I don't believe dying to self in order to serve another, which Paul calls our reasonable worship in the age of grace, and which is to be conducted on a daily basis in our lives, is what some are calling worship today. If you don't think worship, as that word is used in religianity, is all about serving emotions rather than serving men, cease the singing for a time and see if you can begin to count the empty pews. And again, this is not a condemnation of music or singing. It's about understanding worship as it comes from the pen of Paul. Someone recently pointed me to 1 Timothy 2:8, the passage where Paul tells Timothy, I will therefore, it was Paul's desire, that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath or doubting. This individual said, there it is. Well, you can read it for yourself. There it is. We're to sing with our hands held high upward. That's what changed my life, this individual said. It is. The context of this passage is not singing, folks. It's praying. And there's something else you might find interesting about 1 Timothy 2:8. William MacDonald points out that in the Greek there are two words which may be translated men. One word means mankind in general, whereas the other word means men in contrast to women. It's the second word used here. Isn't that interesting? Paul speaking specifically about men and prayer in this passage, although women can certainly pray. He's not talking about singing at all in this passage. Isn't it interesting? He doesn't have to remind the women to pray. His focus is on the men here. And understand, when Paul talks about lifting up holy hands, he isn't telling men that they should have their hands lifted towards the ceiling while they're praying. That's not his point at all. If that's what you've taken from this passage, you're taking something that isn't sitting in this passage. Paul isn't talking about physical posture while you're praying. He's talking about the manner of life of the man who's praying when he talks about lifting up holy hands. He's not saying, get your body in a certain position and make sure the hands are pointed upward and then the current can run all the way to God. That's not Paul's intent here. Holy hands is used in a figurative sense in this passage, with the emphasis being placed on the character of the person doing the praying, not the holiness of the soft tissue, the muscle, the fat, the bones, the ligaments that form that which lies beyond our wrists. But lest we get too far off track, returning to Paul's statement in Philippians 3:17, once again, he's talking about being followers together of him. The context is Paul's desire to be made conformable to Christ's death. That's the manner in which we're to follow Paul. Christ wasn't singing on the cross of Calvary, folks. Christ was dying there. There's a very real difference. Christ was willingly giving himself on behalf of others. Oh, that's our reasonable worship, Paul tells us. He was sacrificing self for the sake of others. How often do we do that? That's what the believer's labor of love is all about in this dispensation, according to our apostle. It's a bema seat. It's a judgment seat of Christ issue, according to our apostle. You see, his follow me statement in Philippians 3 is not about his unique and special Gentile apostleship and the mystery committed to his trust for us. Although it's related in that we are to serve Christ's body, which is our reasonable worship today, and the body of Christ is indeed a part of the mystery, Paul's not pointing out the uniqueness of his Gentile apostleship or the mystery of a new creation called the body of Christ. He's pointing out to the reasonable service of the grace-age believer in this passage. The sacrifice of self is, in Philippians 3, is closely connected with the sacrifice of self statements Paul makes in Romans chapter 12. And that's the context of Philippians chapter 3, where he says, be followers together with me. If you want to know what that's all about, you can listen to a few of these statements from Romans 12. They're very closely related. For I say, Romans 12:3, through the grace given to me, to every man is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. How many of us do that? How many of us in our lives, everything's about self. It's all about how this makes me feel, how this satisfies my need, how this fills my want. And do we not all want our wants satisfied? But to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith, or faith's standard. Faith's standard is that we put others on the throne and we take self off the throne of our lives. You see how the saints in Philippi would need to become followers of Paul in being made conformable unto Christ's death? Philippians is a rebuke epistle, gentle rebuke, but a rebuke epistle based upon love or body truth doctrine. Let love be without dissimulation or hypocrisy. We say we love others. We tell folks we love you, but do we really love them when it comes to the demand that each of us make for satisfaction of self? Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor, doing what? Preferring one another. Boy, he's taking it to a state here that we're not all happy with. Prefer the other, yes, Romans 12:10. Distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which, now we're getting serious. Bless them which what? Persecute you. Bless and curse not, Romans 12:13-14. Be of the same mind one to another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Condescend to men of low estate. Wow. This is strong stuff here. It's judgment seat of Christ material, folks. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:18. This is what Paul's talking about, folks, in the book of Philippians, where he states in chapter 2, verse 4, look not every man on his own things only here being the idea, but every man also on the things of others. You see, Paul is not pointing to his unique Gentile apostleship with his statement in Philippians 3:17 as he tells his readers to be followers together of him. He's talking about his quest to be made conformable unto Christ's death, a living sacrifice for the sake of others, that unbelievers might come to understand the gospel of the grace of God, and that believers might be edified as we take self off the pedestal of our thinking and live in service to others, to the body of Christ around us while we're here on planet Earth.